American households are now having to take emergency distributions from their 401k retirement accounts in order to pay their bills and pay their mortgage costs. With the Wall Street Journal reporting that more Americans are treating their 401ks like cash machines, noting that a record share of 401k account holders took early withdrawals from their accounts last year for financial emergencies, with the share of participants taking early withdrawals increasing to 3.6%, which is the highest rate of all time and nearly double its pre-pandemic level. Now, folks, if our economy was so strong, if our housing market was so strong, why would Americans be needing to take emergency withdrawals from their retirement accounts to pay their bills? This is a data point that suggests that underneath the surface, the US economy is not healthy. Even more concerningly, nearly 40% of those who took a hardship distribution from their 401k did so to avoid foreclosure, compared with 36% in 2022. And so not only do we now have a record share of Americans draining their retirement savings to pay their bills, we have nearly half of the people doing it to avoid foreclosure, meaning that they can't afford their mortgage payments. But folks, what's even crazier about this report is that in 2023, more than 75% of hardship distributions totaled $5,000 or less, meaning that Americans, after 2+ years of rampant inflation, no longer have the money to just pay basic expenses and basic bills that might cost $1,000 or $2,000. They don't have the money for that, so they need to reach into their 401k in retirement, pull the money out early, and take a 10% penalty to do so. And there's numerous ramifications about this data for the US economy and housing market that I'm going to talk to you guys about in this video, because it's very important you understand what's going on here. There's lots of people out there who are trying to deceive you and try to trick you into thinking that the economy is strong and the economy is healthy. But folks, unfortunately, it's not. And data like this proves it's not. Because as people are dipping into their retirement savings, data from the New York Fed shows that the delinquency rate on auto loans, credit card loans, and mortgages is surging. Credit card loan delinquencies are now at their highest rate since 2009. Auto loan delinquencies are also now at their highest rate since 2009, while mortgage delinquencies are increasing and are almost back to their pre-pandemic level. However, we know, folks, that this yellow line, mortgage delinquencies, is going to keep increasing into the future, especially as people start running out of money in their retirement accounts. And this is something I've been predicting on this channel for the last 1 to 2 years, that actually the American homeowner and consumer is not as fundamentally strong as the mainstream financial media wants you to believe. Rather, cracks are showing up all over for the consumer in terms of their ability to afford their bills and afford their payments. After all, the rate of inflation over the last several years was way higher than their rate of wage growth, particularly in 2021 and 2022, when the inflation rate peaked at 9%, you can see the inflation rate peaked at about 4.5% higher than the wage growth. And this situation where the inflation was higher than the wage growth lasted for about 2 years. And over the last year, we've been in the situation where they've been roughly equal. Maybe the wage growth has been a little bit above the inflation the last year, but not enough to counteract this huge gap where Americans became much poorer. And so this has created a very interesting situation in the economy, because the mainstream perception of the economy is that it's healthy, right? We keep seeing high job growth numbers. We keep seeing an unemployment rate below 4%. We see a stock market that's in the biggest bubble of all time, which I talked about in a video a couple weeks ago. So we see these things which on the surface suggest that the economy is strong. However, for the average American or the average small business on Main Street, that is not the case. They don't have the same perception that the economy is strong. And Bloomberg talked about this in a recent article, everyone. I want you folks to look at this article titled "American Debt Stings Like Never Before in New Era for Households with Credit Woes Souring Americans on the Economy." And they quoted a woman in this article. Her name is Nikki. She lives in Denver. She's 40 years old and she's a recruiter. And she's basically saying that in this economy, she's making the most money she's ever made, but she's still living paycheck to paycheck. She says that there's this wild disconnect between what people are experiencing and what economists are experiencing. I think that's a great quote, everyone, because it's the economists often in America right now who are telling us that things are great, that the economy is really good. It's the kind of PhD economists who are saying these things. And it's something that is not resonating at all with the average American, because the average American is just trying to keep up and unfortunately having to take out a lot of debt just to sustain their lifestyle, just to pay their rent, just to, go out and have a good time and pay for a dinner every once in a while. Americans are having to take out now a record amount of credit card debt to do that. With the aggregate US credit card balance now reaching 1.1 trillion. 1.1 trillion, everyone. You can see that's the highest credit card aggregate balance of all time. It's higher than it was before the pandemic by about 20%. It's higher than it was at the peak of the 2008 debt bubble by about 20%. So we have a record amount of credit card debt. We're in a time where the credit card interest rates are above 20%, which is inevitably leading to a big increase in delinquencies. And in particular, these delinquencies, which are indications of people not paying their credit card bills, not paying their auto bills, not paying their mortgage balances, are occurring most in the lowest income segments. This black line measures the lowest quartile of income. You can see the lowest quartile of income has the highest delinquency rate, while the highest quartile of income, the yellow line, has the lowest delinquency rate. And so that's the other thing about this economy and housing market, everyone, is that a lot of the narrative is written by higher income people. They're the ones who control what gets put out into the mainstream financial news. And so a lot of higher income people are still doing pretty well, especially higher income people who own stocks and higher income people who own houses in markets that haven't crashed yet. And so they're kind of the ones spinning this idea that the economy is fine. But very clearly for people on the lower income segment, the middle income segment, it's a real struggle right now. And fundamentally, what this is going to lead to is a big sell-off on the US housing market because there's 100 million houses in the US, everyone. And when we're seeing this type of financial distress hit Americans more broadly, particularly on the lower and middle income segment, inevitably we're going to see probably several million American homeowners be forced to sell their house. And these homeowners, they were able to avoid doing that for a couple years after the pandemic because of all the checks that the government sent out, the foreclosure and eviction moratoriums, all those things were kind of band-aids that allowed this housing bubble to last for longer than people thought it would. But those band-aids are being ripped off right now. And in fact, we're already actually seeing a big surge in inventory and affordable homes hit the US housing market. With data from Redfin showing that new listings rose to the highest level in 17 months in February. So new listings is a new seller putting their house for sale on the market. You can see the listings have increased substantially. Now, they're still below what they were during the pandemic, the new listings, but they're ramping up and they're ramping up fast, particularly in housing markets like Austin, Dallas, and Charleston, South Carolina, where the new listings are up 40% year over year. Meanwhile, new listings fell in only two metros, Albany, New York, and Buffalo. Additionally, active listings, which is total inventory and supply on the market, has spiked in markets like Cape Coral, Northport, Sarasota, Florida, as well as Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So we have big increases in inventory in Florida, big increases in new listings in Texas. And many of those new listings are coming from these homeowners who are struggling financially. This is kind of like the silent wave of listings hitting the US housing market. It's not getting a lot of attention right now because it's not like this loud, bombastic foreclosure crash that occurred in 2008. I do think something like that might still come down the road, but rather many of these homeowners are starting to realize that now is the time to sell. Their credit cards are maxed out and they realize that they better cash in their house equity while they still have the chance. And what's really, really interesting actually, folks, is some of this biggest surge in houses being listed is coming in the affordable home segment. Houses less than 350,000. That's where we're seeing the biggest increase in listings. With data from Realtor.com showing that finally affordable homes are flooding the market. Here's where you can buy for under $350,000 today. And folks, after I read this headline, I was like initially a little skeptical about affordable homes flooding the market. But then when I looked at the data, I was like, wow. Realtor.com is reporting that the number of homes for sale in the $200,000 to $350,000 range has shot up 21% compared to the same month last year. So folks, I want you to think about that. February 2024 compared to February 2023. We now have 21% more affordable homes on the market than we did a year ago. Think about that. There's lots of people out there who are trying to tell you there is no housing downturn, there is no housing crash coming, home prices are only going to go up, but yet we have 21% more affordable homes on the market today than a year ago. Now, clearly, that doesn't mean that everything's affordable. Clearly, things are very expensive still, but that's a signal that things are improving and improving in a big way. With Realtor.com reporting that the top 10 metros with an increase in these affordable listings include Miami, Dallas, Tampa, San Antonio, Houston, Orlando, Atlanta, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, and Birmingham, with these affordable listings increasing by as much as 67% year over year in Miami and 43% in Orlando. And actually, Realtor.com shows what some of these more affordable listings would look like. They give this example of a house in Dallas, Texas on the market for $225,000. You can see it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. So it's kind of small, but actually looks okay on the inside. Not the best house in the world, but livable. Looks like it might have been renovated in the last 5 years or so. And it's for $225,000, which is around a $1,700 a month payment. But do you know what's actually really interesting about that listing I just showed you, everyone? Well, I did a little digging about who the owner of that house in Dallas was who's selling it for $225,000, and guess what I found out? Who's selling that house for $225,000 in Dallas? Well, I went on propwire.com, did a search for this address, and looked at the owner, and the owner is ResiCap Texas Owner LLC. This is a Wall Street investor selling this house, which indicates another trend that we are also seeing in 2024 is that real estate investors are continuing to sell houses onto the US housing market. This is something I've also been predicting for the last 1 to 2 years and something that's really started to happen over the last 6 months. Many of these Wall Street investors, not only have they stopped buying, they are now selling houses. And often they're selling houses in affordable neighborhoods with cheaper prices, which is why the inventory is starting to go up so much in some of these neighborhoods. Because look at this, folks. I want to show you something. This listing we've been talking about here in Dallas, it's in the zip code 75217. And if you open up data on Reventure app and look at the inventory surplus or deficit figure, you can see in this zip code, inventory is now 74% higher than normal. And if you zoom out, you can actually see in many of these zip codes in Dallas, inventory is higher than normal. Inventory and listings have exploded. There is no longer a shortage in these areas. Rather, we now have the highest level on record, at least going back 7 or 8 years, of homes for sale in some of these neighborhoods. Not just in Dallas, but in many parts of America, the inventory is exploding. We have a surplus of homes, which is putting downward pressure on prices. Now, I do want to be very clear about something, everyone, is that, I've been predicting a housing crash for a long time. It was about 3 years ago on YouTube where I made my first video predicting that the US housing market would crash. And so far, from a national perspective, that hasn't happened. And one of the reasons from a national perspective it hasn't happened is because the inventory levels on a national basis are still fairly low. You can see, according to data from Realtor.com, that there's currently 665,000 active listings on the US housing market, which is about 35% below the long-term average for this month of the year. So we still have more work to do to get inventory to increase. Inventory will likely need to trend further to this yellow line before we see the national decline in home prices that I've been predicting and other people have been predicting. However, it's just so important for you to understand that there's massive differences by city and by neighborhood. Because if we go back on Reventure app and look at how much home prices have changed since the middle of 2022, what do we see in a market like Dallas? Oh, well, prices are still going up in this northern corridor north of the downtown area where there's a lot of wealthy suburbs, good school districts. Home prices are still going up here. But then yet, if we go out to some of the more suburban outlying areas, these high growth areas during the pandemic, prices are down 8 to 9%. Yeah, folks, so look at this. We have huge differences in where prices are going down, these areas in blue, and where prices are still going up. What about if we go to New York? Well, you can see in New York, the home prices in Manhattan are down anywhere from 15 to 25% over the last 2 years. There's been a huge drop in prices in Manhattan. There's also been a big drop in prices in Queens and Brooklyn. Yet, if we go just a little bit west to New Jersey, East Orange, and Elizabeth, and some of these areas in New Jersey or out on Long Island, prices are still up. Go and look at the data for yourself, for your zip code and city, so you can see how the inventory levels are trending and how the prices are trending and how over or undervalued home prices are in your area. These are the indicators that are going to give you a true sense of what's happening in your market and if it's a good or bad time to buy and how long you should wait. And to do that, folks, go to www.reventure.app and just type in your city. And one metric I really want to point you guys to is the inventory surplus or deficit. This is a premium metric which tells you the inventory of active listings in the most recent month compared to the long-term average for that month. This metric will help you understand if inventory in your area is high or low compared to the long-term norm. You can see in a market like Miami, we have certain zip codes where inventory is way up, where inventory is higher than normal, where there's a surplus of listings indicating likely downward price pressure, whereas there's other zip codes where inventory is still really low. There's a shortage indicating the prices are likely to continue to go up. So to do that, go to www.reventure.app. I would encourage you guys to sign up for a premium membership. The cost there is $39 a month, and you can cancel that membership at any time after you've done your research. Additionally, I just want to say thank you to all my viewers and subscribers out there who have followed me over the last 3 years. Your support means a lot, and I'm really excited for some of the content I have coming for you further on here in 2024, because things are starting to get really exciting in the housing market. There's some big shifts occurring, and I'm going to be here to track that data for you guys and show it to you for your city and your zip code. So stay tuned.